Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Steven and Kori. I'm Steven and
I'm Kori.
That's Kori.
Welcome.
Oh, wow.
Welcome to Get It Together.
Welcome to Get It Together.
Yes.
You know why we say that? Because, some of you out there, you might be trying to get it together, but you haven't got it together within yourself first.
Yeah.
So we talk about this. Get it together. That starts with you, right? And then get it together
Yes.
starts with you too.
That's right.
Right.
And if you saw the previous show, we had some guests on and they talked about the communicating with yourself before you can communicate with your spouse or your partner is so important, and it's vital to a healthy relationship.
So true.
We are happy to bring this to you as relationship gurus, married 40 years. Yes, That's right. We just celebrated our 40th anniversary.
Yeah, we're fired up. Fresh back from the Grand Cayman Islands where we had a wonderful time. Yeah. It was fantastic.
And, Stephen always confuses me because he says, we're married 41 years. I'm like,
it's actually 42, I think, right?
No, stop. We're in the 41st year. But
hey, people, it just keeps going fast because life with this woman is just a joy.
It's a roller coaster.
Yeah. Although tonight we're getting into some things, or today we're going to be getting into some things about the joy that was maybe not so much joy.
That's right. That's true. So our topic today
What is the topic?
I don't want to say I'm sorry.
I don't want to say I'm sorry. And what are the common courtesies that we should be showing each other in this wonderful journey called marriage?
And remember, we get these topics from you.
Yes.
We get these topics from focus groups and people saying or complaining, or from our coaching clients. If we're doing life coaching with couples or with individuals who are about to get married and they're like, how do I get this person to say they're sorry? Or why is he saying he's sorry so much?
Right.
So we have some experience in that. And we told you most of the time when we're talking to you coming from experience.
That's right. That's right.
Anyway, so the common courtesies in marriage, don't take the other person for granted.
Exactly.
That's the number one thing that we end up doing when we're married for a while. And a while could be 2 years for you, or a while could be 14 years.
That's right.
But that is something that happens a lot, is to take your partner for granted. And, should you...
And you actually do that in many cases by accident. You don't even realize you're doing it, right?
Yeah. And should you saying I'm sorry be the top of the list in common courtesies? Should that be? We're going to talk about that. Should it be one of the number one things in the common courtesy for you to say you're sorry?
Like the bedrock, the foundation of common courtesies. Should it be, I'm sorry?
Yeah. And what is your definition of common courtesies? It might be opening the door for your spouse. It might be pulling out a chair. It might be edifying them when they're down. What are those? What's your definition of a common courtesy? Because it's different for everyone, right?
Absolutely.
It's totally different for everyone.
Absolutely.
So what happens when one spouse says I'm sorry, or has the I'm sorries in abundance?
Yes.
And
the other party, their I'm sorries are literally in short supply.
Limited.
They like squeezing an I'm sorry out of them, like me early on in our marriage.
Yeah.
Yes. Very guilty. And we're going to get into this a little bit down the road here. But early on in our marriage, my personal I'm sorry's, folks,
we're lacking.
We're in short supply.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, this can cause, which is a sad part, but this can cause a communication block in that relationship wall.
Absolutely.
Everyone talks about don't build a wall between your spouse and your partner. That communication block is a cornerstone of that wall.
You're right.
So if you don't want that wall to be built, correct every common courtesy that matters to your spouse. It might not even matter to you, but if you're being courteous, you consider the other person.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
So do you find that using common courtesy towards each other is hard? So that's something you got to look at.
And that's a really good question for you to ponder if you're listening to this podcast. Think about that for a second. And if that's the case, if you answer yes, the question now becomes, why is that?
Yeah.
Why is it that way?
Yeah. And do you find yourselves, I'm moving the sheet over here, but do you find yourselves using the common courtesies? And again, it might not be, I'm sorry, it might be something else.
And here's a big one. What drives for you? What drives an apology or an I'm sorry from you to your spouse? What drives that?
Yeah, let's talk about that for a minute. What does drive that in people?
It's different for a lot of different people. Sometimes it's different for how they were raised.
And it's also a habit. What drives an apology can just become a habit too.
Yes.
We were talking with a close friend of ours today. She's our sister. And our sister that we have chosen, and she was saying something that's so true. A lot of people, you could just be walking by somebody and you both are walking on the same side of the street, and then you realize it and you both go, "Oh, I'm sorry." Well, what are you sorry for? Are you sorry that you both are walking on the same side of the street?
That's
We could
good.
just pull an I'm sorry for anything. But then again, when it comes to our spouse, it's like, I'm not saying I'm sorry. you
Yeah,
know?
you're right.
Or, you could open the door. I was saying, sometimes when I go to the gas station, a gentleman will open the door for me and I say, thank you so much for being a gentleman. And you can see their chest just puff out like, thank you for not putting me down because I'm being a gentleman.
Yeah, absolutely.
However, what happens if your spouse isn't opening the door for you, but a gentleman, as somebody else is? Or what happens if, you're edifying somebody else? You find yourself edifying somebody else more than your spouse. That's not a common courtesy in marriage. That's
Exactly.
that's you being nice, but are you doing it in your with your spouse in your marriage?
Very true. Very true.
Yeah.
Do you only say I'm sorry when you can clearly see that you're at fault?
Yeah. Or
Right?
that you can understand the other person's you might not see your fault, but you understand why they're feeling the way they feel. Like
That's right.
Stephen, he was growing into saying, I'm sorry you feel like that,
Sure.
about when somebody else is saying something to you. Or just the common courtesy of, I'm not feeling well, so he's going to take care of me. Let me get you some soup. Let me go to the store for you. Again, everything is, it's not just about the I'm sorry, but a common courtesy in marriage can be deflated if
Right.
you let it go too long.
Exactly. And part of those common courtesies, please, right?
Mhm.
Please. What happened to please?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. Do you mind? Okay. Excuse me. I mean, what happened to these things?
Right.
We say these things to other people, and unfortunately, many times we're guilty of not saying that to our spouse.
Sure.
You
Sure.
know?
Well, one thing that our daughters learned from this same sister when they were younger, they used to go, "Huh? What?" And she looked at them and said, "You don't say 'huh' and 'what' to your parents. You say 'pardon me.'"
That's
I
right.
love So our little girls, when they were little, they go, "Pardon me," and people
Pardon
go,
me.
"Oh my goodness, that's so sweet." But they say it now. We all say "pardon me" because it is more courteous to say "pardon me," "excuse me, I didn't catch that," as opposed to "huh? What?"
Yeah. You know,
One thing we did talk about is if your apologies are in short supply, do a self check and find out why. Why are they in short supply? What
it's
has
good.
happened in your past or what has not happened that you feel like it's just not a normal thing for you to be aware of what you are causing? And again,
That's
these
right.
are these are common courtesies for you to be aware of yourself too. What are you causing or what are you involved in or what are you around that you're not even aware that you're around that could be hindering someone else?
Exactly.
Mhm.
And what's interesting is we talk about these common courtesies. It's so astonishing how easy it is for these non-courtesies or for us to not be courteous to each other. It's easily slips in.
Mhm,
It's just like
mhm.
overnight. All of a sudden you're not courteous to
Yeah,
each
yeah.
other anymore.
Well,
So
you take each other for granted.
you
Yeah,
take each oh yeah,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
good. What do you think causes that? Familiarity, right? I guess.
Yeah, and even in our relationship, we are friends. We're husband and wife. We're
Yes.
lovers. We're companions, and we're friends. And a lot of times, friends know that they can take each other for granted for a moment. And they go, I'm sorry I did that, but
Yeah,
this is just so. Even in
that's good.
marriage, you become comfortable, and you do take each other for granted, and
Yeah.
you don't put on your best. You don't put on that dating hat
Oh
anymore.
yeah.
That best look for that you should have for yourself. So one thing that we have here as one of the topics is as a spouse, it's important to be aware of the common courtesy your partner is looking for and appreciates. This could be opening the door, like we said before.
Yes, I've always opened the door
He
for
has,
her
and there's a story
from
behind
day
that. You're going to
one.
hear a story behind that. And yes, or pulling out her chair before she sits down, edifying his accomplishments because you know what? Others don't see the hard work that goes into the accomplishments.
That's good.
So edify his accomplishments. Or, a lot of times men say, "My wife dresses me." That's a courtesy because maybe they don't they don't know how to dress. And they're like, "Honey, could you
Very
pick
true.
this out for me?" Or, picking up the dry cleaning, and that could be the male or female. There's no gender role to picking up the dry cleaning and having common courtesies. Maybe hey, let me tell you something. Steven dressed me before, so he's like, "Wear that. That looks good on you." And that's a courtesy because they know, you know what, your hips don't look too good in that.
Oh,
So it's like, why do you put that on? Or honey, you know what? Honey, and you're talking to the
oh,
man,
that's
you have a
funny.
belly, honey. So why don't we put a loose shirt on? Why
Yeah.
don't you wear that little Hawaiian shirt that we put on? So wear a print. So those are just common courtesies, just so that they feel good about themselves.
Right.
A lot of times
Absolutely.
that happens. So
So Anyway, some of these things are kind of a mystery. So we're working to unpack this and kind
Mhm.
of deconstruct why people operate these
Yeah.
ways.
Yeah. So we have our stats and facts. As you guys know, we go into stats and facts, and we pulled stats and facts from one particular counseling center. It's called, according to Thrive Marriage and Family Counseling. So, according to Thrive Marriage and Family Counseling, this is some really good information. We all process emotions and actions differently. Understanding your partner's emotional processing can help you use common courtesy
Mm.
in difficult situations. So, a lot of times we don't even understand. Some people don't even know there's a processing style.
Yeah.
It's
So
just,
what is yours?
yeah, yeah.
Thinking about that, what's your processing style? How do you process
And if you
things?
don't know what they are, we're about to tell you what they are. There's different types of processing styles. So without knowing how your partner processes their emotions, you might be making conversations non-productive by not honoring their need to process in their way. So we also say there's a difference between communication and conversation,
Yeah,
because you
that's
can
good.
communicate without conversation.
Right.
And if you don't know their processing style, you could be wasting your time having conversation instead of truly communicating with them.
Yeah. That's
So
awesome.
why don't we go ahead and you tap on that?
Yeah, I'm gonna read this another one. It says understanding how we process emotion in an argument can be helpful in identifying why communication is ineffective. Right.
Mhm. So
So
let's make the communication effective. That's number one. Make the communication effective. So consider if any of the following processing styles apply to you. You want to talk about the first one?
internal processing, when processing feelings and thought, um, are you just in your head and you just need a space to think about things?
Mhm.
If that's the case, you can actually stop things right there and say, you know what, I need to process this. Just
Yeah.
give me a moment.
And it's called I here's what you may be thinking. I cannot access information or productive thoughts when I am in the heat of the moment.
I mean, that's so courteous, right?
Here it is. To have anything of value to add to a conversation, I need quiet time to reflect on what you have said.
That's good.
That might be a sentence you might need to practice for your spouse. If you push for resolve while my emotions are activated, I will only become defensive and mean. So think about that. That is a process,
It's huge.
internal processing. This is the way, if you know you're an internal processor, these are some conversations you can have with your spouse and your partner. If you push for resolve while my emotions are activated, I will only become defensive and mean. That's clearly tells your spouse, and again, that's a courtesy for your spouse as well as yourself. You're
Sure.
saying to your spouse, "Can you give me the courtesy of letting me digest this?" And you're also saying to your spouse, "I can't talk to you right now. I'm going to be courteous and let you know I'm not trying to be mean. I just need some time." So that's the number one of them, internal processing. And number two, external processing. You want to read on that one?
So that one says, I need access to the person I want to speak to, meaning that you just can't be doing it over text, right? Sometimes people do these kind of things. So you have to have access to the person. And I actually need someone to witness my emotions. That's one of the reasons I need access to that person. So I want to bounce ideas off of them and I want to be able to work it out. That's the key. So, I mean, that's a very courteous way to process.
And here's what they would be saying. Being alone when I'm thinking only makes me feel more confused. So
Mm,
they don't want to be alone. I can't tell what is real or not. I might get loud, use big actions, or cry. I might be emotionally expressive while processing. So again, that is, they need to do that. They need to get it out because
yeah,
they're external. They can't hold it in. They need to cry or yell or just they need to release that tension or whatever that stress problem or level is. So that's number two, external processing.
So, what about you as you're listening to this podcast? How do you process things?
Mhm.
What kind of, do you need internal or do you need it to be external?
Or physical processing. Here's one. I do not have words in my head, but I am experiencing feelings.
It's another
Those
one.
feelings are physically overwhelming and my thinking slows down. So, this might be something you say as a common courtesy. I need to offload the energy in order to engage in a productive conversation by exercising or moving my body. They just
Right.
need to be active, physical processing. It is difficult for me to come up with language to describe how I'm feeling or what I need. Those are people who, remember earlier in one of our shows, Steven said, you know what, if you have an argument, hey guys, sometimes I just have to walk
You just
away.
have to walk
I
away.
just got to walk away
That's right.
because he has to internally process and he might physically. Some people, they get out there and
Just
they're
get
like, I
away.
need to go to the gym.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just need to go to a kickboxing class, or
Right.
maybe I need to get on the piano and play an instrument,
It's
or,
good.
this is their physical processing, how they it's therapeutical for them.
Sure. Absolutely.
And then the last one is
The last one is, let's see, verbal processing. Okay, now that's interesting. Whether you spend time thinking, writing, or speaking, you have a lot of words to say, and you've got to be able to get it out verbally. Yes.
So what are they saying?
So, I'm using words as building blocks to make sense of all this. There's an active equation that I'm trying to solve, such as A plus B equals C. That's an interesting point of view when you look at it. And if A is the problem, I need to work through B to get to C, and B is an exhaustive review of all the information around the situation. So yeah, there's a formula to it. So it's a process, it's a lock-in step. And anytime you have something like that, typically it will work for you. That's you identified. That's your way to communicate. That's what's important.
Yeah. Verbal. A lot of people like to talk about it. So we're talking about people who just want to just get a lot out of their head.
Yes.
So you have to be ready for that. If that's your spouse and your partner, the common courtesy is, I'm just going to let them talk. This is how they function. I'm going to let them get away and have a physical processing of this.
Right.
So these are, again, non-verbal communication skills, some of them, and some of them are verbal communication skills.
But notice what you said, skill. This is a skill. That means that it can be acquired. And this will allow you to keep the main thing, and not attack each other.
Yeah.
Okay. Attack the issue. Learn the skills, as we're talking about this, of common courtesy to keep the main thing.
Yeah.
Because again, we've said this many times. We said a lot of times during season 1, you know what? You're on the same team. And developing these skills and being able to say, first of all, I'm sorry. Right? Begin with I'm sorry to diffuse the situation, and then utilize these skills to work through it. Right?
So true. So another stat. So that was all statistics that we just call it stats and facts. Another stat and fact from Thriving Marriage and Family Council. We found that conversations sometimes can be non-productive, but communication will always be a position of positive support. So again, non-productive conversation being non-productive. Here's a quote from one of the therapists there. While telling my client to simply stop at any action is rarely effective, I certainly notice when there are patterns that are not serving the conversation. These are questions that we must consider. So hear that again. While he or she, the therapist, is telling his client or her client to simply stop any action is rarely effective, because you can't stop an action. It's rarely effective to do that. However, they certainly notice when there are patterns that are not serving the conversation. Those have to be addressed. So these are questions that they offer to their clients to consider.
That's great.
What happens when your partner yells?
What happens when your partner yells? You basically tune them out, right? Or do you listen more or less when your partner yells? What happens?
What happens when we start to say hurtful things?
We're not keeping the main thing. We are now becoming in the process of attacking each other.
And what is the reverse or a common courtesy instead of yelling? So again, they ask these questions to their clients who are frustrated and can't get out their resolution. And usually that's where the apology comes from, because someone has offended them in some way, or they've taken the offense. And also it might not even be in the I'm sorry. It could just, again, be in the conversation.
It's good. So now what we say is you ask yourself these following questions. Do all of our arguments happen when we are under the influence of other substances? Ooh, that's an interesting question. Do all of our arguments happen when we are under the influence of other substances?
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Loose lips or attitudes,
Or do they happen when we're exhausted? Good one. Do you notice any non-productive trends in your conversations and actions that contribute to a lack of understanding? How would you answer that? Okay.
Good.
When you are at a crossroads, do you need to have rules for your conversation? That's a good question, right? So
we can't argue so this is some of the answers. You can't argue when you're tired or hungry or drunk. I mean, if you've been drinking, you have to have some rules. Remember, we told you at the beginning, there's some relationship etiquettes you have to put in place.
Yeah.
So maybe you say to yourself, we're not arguing when we're hungry, because a lot of times you get that angry hungry, or if we're tired, yeah, we can't argue if we've been drinking or, whatever our substance is. This is not a time for that. You have to have boundaries into, we're not going to argue right now because it's not going to make any sense, because we're dealing with an emotion and a physical,
That's good.
I'm tired, I'm hungry, I'm drunk, whatever it might be. If one or both of us starts yelling, this is another thing you might
Probably
want
not
to
a good
resolve.
thing.
Yeah. If one of or both of us starts yelling, let's take a 20-minute break to cool off. So if you can commit that to yourselves as you're in a conversation or in a crossroads, you can say, these are our rules and this is what we're going to do, so that we can appreciate each other, have the common courtesy to allow each other the time and the space to gather, and also the processing style,
Right.
because maybe that 20-minute break becomes a 40-minute break because somebody needs to go punch a bag, or somebody needs to go, think about internally,
Whatever it takes,
whatever it takes.
you
Right.
know?
And then maybe that 20 minutes is like really hard for the person that has that likes to verbal process,
Sure.
but they can gather their thoughts and they can go and they can just verbally
Yeah.
communicate to their spouse about that. So we're going to get into our own personal real raw experiences.
Yes, absolutely.
And I'm going to go first because, as Steven says, I was the ultimate I'm sorry queen. Yeah. I could find a reason to be sorry for somebody.
She's a saint, man. I'll tell you.
I'm not a
She
saint,
is,
but
yeah.
I was always apologizing for somebody or something that happened to somebody. I may not have even been involved, but I was sorry. So one thing, even as a young woman, I thought you had to apologize for everything. It was just a nice thing to do because I was a nice person. So you just automatically, especially girls, girls grow up to just say, I'm sorry all the time. And I don't know why that is. It's not feminine to do it. It's not, it doesn't show the soft side of somebody. It just
Right.
shows it actually shows a weak side if you're apologizing for everything and when you have no control over what has
So true.
happened.
So true.
Now you have empathy, but there's a difference between that and just apologizing for, like I said earlier, you're on the same side of the street or sidewalk and you just shift over. That's a
Yeah.
common thing to happen. You don't have to apologize for that.
Yeah.
So I was also the young woman who didn't think a common courtesy was a man holding the door for you. So as much as I would apologize, I also didn't have that feeling of, I don't need a man to hold a door for me. As you know, earlier, I talked about me having that Jezebel spirit, and man holding a door for me or pulling the chair out for me. Why would they do that? I can open a door myself. And in today's society, you poor guys out there, you get slammed for being nice. You get slammed for being a gentleman. Don't worry. You keep being a gentleman. These women will come around because I came around. I was one of those,
Excuse me. Yeah.
why would I need that? I can open a door myself. Well, yeah, you can, but
It's
if
true.
you don't have to,
That's right.
why would you? So that was my experience with the whole common courtesy, the apology, what in society I felt was necessary for me to feel like I was being appreciated. And the common courtesy of opening a door,
Right.
I didn't feel like I was being appreciated, which is crazy,
It's
right?
true.
Yeah. So,
Very true.
but when I met Steven was raised with Southern hospitality. For those of you across the world who don't know what that means, that just means that he was raised to be a gentleman, and there's Southern hospitality for women. You are raised to be a young woman,
It's
a
true.
gentle woman. And when we met, we were friends first, as you know that story. He would open the door for me and I would get mad at him. Poor thing. I'm so sorry. I would get
I
mad at
forgive
him.
you.
Yeah,
I
thank
forgive you, honey.
I'm like, "Will you open the door for me?" And it's interesting because I thought he was trying to hit on me, and and like, we were friends. So I'm like, "You don't need to hold the door for me." And he goes, "That's just how I was raised." I said, "You were raised like that?" And the sad part is I don't recall that being a norm that I saw men do around me. And maybe they did. I just didn't notice it. Enough, well, so much so that when you did it, it was odd to me.
Right. I remember that.
So it blew me away that he was so kind and so appreciative, or so gentlemanlike, in taking care, pulling out my chair for me, opening the car door, the door to the store or whatever. And thank you for that.
Well, you're welcome.
Yeah. And
You're
we
welcome.
raised our daughters to expect that too, because I end up liking that because I realized this is a good thing. Yeah.
Sure.
So,
You know what? It's just like with life, whatever goes around comes around.
mhm.
And so we talked earlier in this, we've been married for 40 years and we're still doing that.
Mhm.
And she doesn't mind it. But here's the reality. We all bring in various things and norms to the marriage. And so, for as common as I'm sorry was for her, my I'm sorries were in very short supply. It's one of those things that I've learned over time, over years, we've found a good balance between, her constantly saying I'm sorry and me never really seeing a reason to say I'm sorry unless I could totally see, okay, I am clearly at fault here. Kori had nothing to do with this. This caused her some kind of, discomfort or harm in some way. I am so sorry. And by the way, when that did happen for me, I'm like overwhelmingly sorry. I just kept saying it because, again, I truly am sorry. But early on, I couldn't see all the reasons where she was saying I'm sorry. I'm like, why do you keep saying I'm sorry? Well, you're not sorry. Well, no, I'm not sorry. I had nothing to do with that.
And we always say,
It's so funny.
Even if Steven had 40% to do with it, if
Yeah.
it wasn't 50, he wasn't
Yeah.
saying he was
My
sorry.
mind, and here's the thing, okay? My mindset was this, right? I do enough that I am totally sorry for. So anything that I am not 100% sorry for, I mean, come on. Yeah, we need to move on.
Yeah, but you've changed.
No, I've
Yeah,
changed,
yeah,
absolutely,
yeah, thank
100%. I mean, right now, my I'm sorry just says, honey, I'm so sorry that you have a headache. Even I had
Mhm.
nothing to do with it. I'm just sorry that you have a headache. And that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Early on, it didn't.
So what about the common courtesies?
Common courtesies, I think, please, thank you. My wife is a saint in all these things. She asks for everything. If she wants to taste something on my plate, could I please try that? I mean, I'm from a family of many kids. And so if we see something we want, we like, hey, can I see that? And by the way, we take it, but that would actually send her over the edge.
Oh yeah.
So because that's not a common courtesy, that's her plate.
Mhm.
It's her food. Right. And I shouldn't be just invading her space.
He would,
Right.
I'll tell you, he used to, we'd have, even if we had leftovers in the refrigerator, and it was my leftovers, I would go in there the next day and it'd be gone. That's a
That's wrong.
That's
It
a common
really is.
courtesy, by the way.
Yeah.
At
Hey,
least,
can I please have your leftovers?
yeah,
Are you going to have your leftovers?
or just say, are you?
That's
Yeah,
wrong.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. He used to. So little things
Little
that you
things.
grow up with,
Little things.
you don't think matter
Yeah.
until you're. And we've already said that many, many times. We're coming from a lot of people are coming from two different scenarios,
Two
but the
different
common
scenarios.
courtesy is something that we forget
Yes.
is part of the growth.
Please. Thank you. Excuse me.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
So we're going to move on to our real questions that we have out here from our viewers and from our focus groups. So we're going to get into the box and pull out. Here we go.
Let me read the first one here.
Okay.
All right. My wife and I have been married for 14 years. And over the past year, it seems like she has become harder and sharper in her words towards me. How do I bring back that kindness and thoughtfulness she used to have towards me?
Mm.
That's good.
Yeah.
What do you think on that?
First of all, ask her why. Have a conversation. Why? What's going on? What's going on? And it might be one of those processing steps that we talked about, the 4 different processing styles. But the first thing I think is to ask her why. If she won't be sharp with you, or even if she's sharp with you, if she can express her why. And then on your behalf, if you've been married 14 years, this might be a midlife thing for her.
Sure,
Just
yeah.
like we talked about with the menopause and andropause earlier, it could be that she doesn't even know she's being sharp with you. Like I didn't know I was being sharp with my family. What did it say? Sharp and harder.
Yeah.
She might not even know it. It could just be a hormone thing. And, most women go, I don't want to talk about it. It's not the hormones. But it really could be if she's at that stage, and it's up to you to be sensitive to that.
Yeah,
also,
and also, excuse me.
Okay.
So maybe she's
courtesy. Excuse me.
So maybe she's actually mirroring some things that you're doing. Have you thought about that for a second?
Yeah.
You may have some issue here in terms of you may be part of the cause. Have you thought
Yes.
about that?
One thing that I always like to do is do a self-examination.
Self-examination.
You examine
Yes.
yourself and say, if I've done anything to cause an offense or cause discomfort, I need to find that within myself first. And then you can go from there, because if you're clean and pure of thought and pure at heart, there's more openness for a discussion to happen.
And the other thing that is you could also do, again, under the perspective of common courtesies, you could simply say something like, you know what, honey, it seems like your words have been sharper, and maybe you can even use some of the words. Whenever you get an opportunity, right, to stop her right in the tracks, you should stop them and say, hey, let's this is sort of coming off, funny, sounds a little harsh or
Mhm.
whatever. I don't know if you realize that this is how it sounds, but
Yeah,
this is how I'm receiving it.
that's good.
Right.
That's really good. Yeah.
So
You want to get to the next one?
let's get to the next one.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, you got to read this one. This one's for me.
Well, then you should read it.
Okay. I will read it. Stephen, this is for you. In your other shows, you've said you traveled a lot. How did you come home and have the energy to show those common courtesies and keep an emotional bank account for Kori? Wow. Well, let me tell you something. That is actually not easy, but the real answer is it is it's a focus, right? On making deposits so that you can actually get a return. Because a
Mm,
lot of times when I would get home, she would be, really worn down. And I have to be very understanding. Okay, invest those common courtesies. Honey, can I help you with this? Honey, what about that? What about this? What about that? And that in itself would open her up, right?
mhm. Yeah. And also, I had to be respectful of the fact that he's coming home, and so it starts with her, it starts with your wife also. So,
Sure.
if there's a cocoon that's built there, a haven for your spouse, that when he comes home, he doesn't feel like he has to do as much work just to get to a point of relaxing and enjoying his cocoon. So, you're saying that if you're tired after you, how did you come home? Yeah. So you're saying that you must travel a lot too, and how do you do that? How do you have the energy
Yeah.
if the household is already a place of peace? It's a haven. It's a place of protection. Then it's easier for you to recharge and be in a good place and
Right.
space for that relationship to
You
continue to
actually have
flow.
to shift gears. You
Mhm.
really do have to shift gears. And
When did you do that? Like, you travel, are you shifting gears on the plane on the way home? Are you shifting gears on the car ride to the airport
normally,
to the house, or what?
normally it's actually on the way home from the airport.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what are you doing at that point? What
Just
mentally?
really mentally trying. The focus is to put the week behind
Mhm,
whatever transpired in the office or on the road.
mhm.
Those things are now second tier to what's happening in the home.
Okay.
Now, how can I serve my family just as well I've been serving others since I've been away?
But how do you recharge while you're doing that? Do you feel depleted even though you're like, "Okay, now I
Actually,
gotta go
when you
home."
can physically shift gears, it's a little bit energizing because you have different roles.
Mhm,
So for me personally, I would understand, okay, I'm a father role, I'm a husband role. What are the things that might need to be I'm a handyman role. I
mhm,
mean, what are
mhm,
the things that might need to happen?
mhm.
And I mean, have to have some input while I'm home. So
Gotcha. Yeah, yeah. That's a good one. Yes. Okay. We've got time for one more.
just
Okay.
one more.
Okay, let's see here. My wife is an officer at her company. She tells me it bothers her for me to open her door or pull out her chair in front of company
Wow.
associates. How can I assure her this has nothing to do with her position? Why don't you handle
That's,
that?
you know what? Powerful at work, it does not have an impact on your femininity,
Mm,
right?
that's good.
I think that should be not even a question. All right, it should be one of those situations where you allow your husband, okay, to serve you, allow your husband to be courteous, to
Mhm.
be kind to you. Has nothing to do with the power ladder at work.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And it's also showing that you can still have a great relationship in front of your coworkers. If they're your
Absolutely,
associates, if she's an officer, so she might be in one of the C suites. It shows those people, wow, they have a great relationship. And share
yes,
that with her.
yes,
Say, honey, let me
absolutely.
tell you something. This is who I am. And I'm not going to stop being who I am
That's right,
in front of your associates. As
one
a matter of
hundred percent.
fact, they can see how much I honor and love you by the things I do to show you that I appreciate the feminine side of who you are.
Absolutely, that's kind of like, in my opinion, getting your roles a little bit out of order.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
So, well, that's the questions we have for today
yes,
for this show. Thank you for those questions because
absolutely,
these are some of your personal and really heartfelt because you're dealing with an unseen. It's an emotion. It's an
absolutely.
unseen, and a common courtesy could be anything to anyone. So, for you to be able to narrow that down and understand what those processing styles are is really important for your marriage and for your relationship within your household because you'll learn when you have children or if you already have children they may have a processing style that everyone has to get used to.
Yes.
And if you have more than one child, it's great when other children can see their siblings. This is how
Absolutely.
they process. Don't worry, they're not mad at me. Yeah.
And a sincere "I'm sorry"
Mhm.
really can do more than we could imagine how powerful that is.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That
So-
is like could be the secret sauce for
Yeah.
your relationship.
Yeah.
So
A sincere one. Yeah.
and sincere relationship.
yeah.
So until next week, guys.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us. Remember to
Subscribe.
get a notification so that bell rings when our show's coming on.
That's
And
right.
remember to go to our website, stevenandkori.com/podcast. So
Absolutely.
you can watch all our podcasts, and you can also see the blogs, the write-ups on the podcast, on our shows, and also so that you can maybe become a client if you'd like to do that also. But we really appreciate you sharing our podcast with others, listening in and watching. So if you want to watch us, we're on YouTube and on Rumble. And if you want to listen, we're on iHeart, Apple, Google, Spotify. We're on all those podcast locations. So again, thanks for joining us, and we will see you on the next show.